on GloommeTV. My name is Faith Joseph. Thank you for joining us on the program for today. Now, in June 1993, Nigerians went to the polls, and what was adjudged one of the freest first elections ever conducted in the country was annulled. Okay, and it just seemed like democracy for that period was truncated, and for 25 years it did seem like that part of history, that particular happening, was forgotten, because we of course got into another democracy in 1999 when President Obasanjo took over from the military, and it just seemed like, well, we've started the Fourth Republic and then that is it. But there are people who thought that the incident of 1993 took us back decades in our democracy journey, and there are people who thought that justice was denied, that thought that, you know, Nigeria didn't do right by not acknowledging that particular happening in our history. Okay, but last Wednesday, the 5th of June, the president made a declaration that seemed to start another conversation, and that was when he decided to honor the adjudged winner of that election, as well as his running mate, that's Chief MKO Abiola, his running mate, Babagana Kingibe, and of course, human rights activist and fighter, late Chief Gani Fawemi. It has started another conversation, another discuss, and we're going to be talking about that today on the show. The nuance of it, the perspectives, the feelings, everything. No other person, of course, feels this more. No other people felt this more than the families of these people, especially the family, of course, of Chief MKO Abiola. So here to discuss with us the nuance and all of the perspective, emotions, and everything with that declaration is none other than the daughter of Chief MKO Abiola, Mrs Hafsat Abiola Costello. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And it's really great to have you. Thank you for inviting us into your home as well. Okay, so let's start from first. Congratulations on your appointment. You know, you're the first African head, you know, for this women initiative. So congratulations are in order. Double celebration, right?
A much bigger one because of this award to my dad.
Okay.
Because this issue had cast a gloom over my family for all these years, and we just feel like all of a sudden it's lifted. We're all so happy.
Wow. I mean, 25 years of wrong undone. That's a long time, actually. I read your poem, your reaction to this, and you talked about how you were disappointed that the person who benefited from this run, this fight for democracy in 1999, did not even acknowledge your father in his speech the entire 8 years he was in power. It was almost like he wanted to forget that ever happened, and that's talking about former President Olusegun Obasanjo. How did you feel? How members of your family? How did you feel at that period?
I remember in 1999, around May, when they were organizing for the transition, you know, I just was so hopeful that things hadn't gone as we had hoped, but we were going to have a democracy in Nigeria, which is what my parents had fought for. That I knew we would do something. I just didn't know what he would do, and what he did in the end was nothing. It was a whole lot of nothing. Nothing, not even to mention M.K. Abiola's name. It was the most surreal experience you can imagine, and it taught me a lot, because you are so young, so you may not even know my father at all, but he was one of the biggest human beings that existed, that had ever lived. You know, having M.K. Abiola as a father made it such that you could not be in awe of anybody. Once you had such a person as your father, it was so large, so full of life, so generous, so giving. He was so kind. His real religion was love. You know, we say we're a Muslim family, but MKO he just loved everybody, and that was his religion, how to express his affection and show concern and give to people and help people and empower people. So that was where we were coming from. And then we arrive at May 29, or we arrive at 1999, MKO has died, having fought for Nigeria's democracy. And we have this person who is now president, now demonstrating traits that we've never imagined, we've never even encountered. You know, it was a revelation. It was a revelation from which it took us a while to even understand what was happening and to accept. You know, for a long time I wept and I asked myself, how is it that a country is in such need of leaders, people who can really, who feel compassion, who will reach for our poor people, lift them, who will be consumed with concern for our poor. And here is where we are, with people, it's embodied in this person who cannot even show appreciation from something from which he has benefited so clearly.
I remembered, you know, my parents. I mean, I'm not Yoruba. I remember my parents, everybody going to vote, and everybody wanted to vote for Abiola.
Wow.
You know, and everybody just talked about how much he gave, how much he was a philanthropist. So that was the only picture I had, that, oh, there's this man that's going to be president. And then he wasn't president. And then, you know, there were riots and protests. And I knew I had to be picked from school a lot of the time because of the protests and the riots that were happening. But, I mean, fast forward to when democracy started again, the Fourth Republic in 1999. There are people who thought, you know, that Nigeria's democracy has not grown because of that incident. Do you hold that belief as well?
I think that the people we have at the helm of affairs matter. You know, so we can have a democracy, but if we have people who are not really committed Democrats, it has an impact. And it was to our misfortune, you know, because by 1999, what had happened, to go back a little bit in history, is that first we had a transition program that began in 1990, and it was stopped in 1992. Then General Ibrahim Babangida started another one that was to culminate in 1993, which was the one my father was involved in. And then that result was annulled, which created the June 12th movement. So by the time we got to 1999,
yes,
many credible politicians were convinced that this was just another farce by the Nigerian military, and they didn't want to participate. So a lot of the people that went in were not really people that had considered service, public service, that really had an agenda. You know, there was just a lot of, you know, let's just go and see. And they got there, and this time the military actually did go back to the barracks. But unfortunately for a lot of the people involved in the democratic movement, they had sat out this transition, and it was the transition that actually was resolved.
Was resolved, and so we're where we are right now.
Yes.
But did you think, from the declaration of the president, you know, last week, did you think that justice was finally done? Did you think that any right was corrected?
Oh yes, I do, because it's something you feel in your heart, you know. So I don't know how other people are in their lives, but my imagination has always been captured by the African sense of you know what Africans believe about when you die, that you go to the ancestral place. This has always been my belief. Even though I'm Muslim, I'm observing my Ramadan, but that's just always been my own imagination of what happens with our loved ones when they die. And I could just imagine M.K.O. And in fact, this idea that what the picture I had in my mind evoked a lot of compassion and sympathy for all the ancestors that were around M.K.O. at this critical time in the ancestral place. Because
the happiness and the jubilation
M.K.O. would be unstoppable. He would have been telling them this story, that story, drumming, singing. They would not have been able to stop him. So I was just like, how will my mom, how will she be coping now? You know, she'd just be like, Nigeria, because you'll be so ecstatic. And just imagine how happy he feels. I just feel really fulfilled.
So the family has a sense of closure now?
Yes, I can say that very confidently. I just saw my stepmom today, Dr. Abiola. You know, she's a journalist, as you are, and she just told me, she said, and she had never told me this before, she said it felt as if with the annulment and all what happened after, that her heart broke you know, and she actually fell very ill very recently and nearly died, and it was a heart condition. And she just told me that she now feels healed.
Wow.
You know, this issue touched all of us. It touched all of us, and it impacted all of us. And so we feel really happy at what has happened with the president, and we cannot thank President Buhari enough. It took courage to do what he did, because so much wrong was done, and the people that did the wrong are still with us.
Talking about
still
the people,
powerful.
yes. Talking about the people that did the wrong, I mean, I saw a tweet, you know, that same day, by the person who annulled the election. That's you know, former head of state, General Bangida, and he said that you know, he was glad that the election was conducted, but the freest, fairest election was conducted by himself. And I've heard him in interviews say that nobody gives him credit, you know, for conducting a free and fair election, actually the freest and fairest election in Nigeria.
We cannot give him credit because he did not follow through.
Oh.
He did not follow through. We encouraged him, my father encouraged him, and he said he was afraid to die because if he said that certain people in the army would kill him. I think, you know, they say a coward dies 1,000 deaths.
Yes, before
a courageous man dies but once. You know, so I think that really captures what happened with General Babangida. And what he did, his failure to hand over based on the election results of 1993, really harmed this country. Look at where we were in 1993. Your people in Delta, people in many states in the east, people in states in the north, even in my father's opponent, Alhaji Bashir Tofa's state in Kano, voted for Abiola.
Yes.
Christians, who are half of Nigeria's population, overlooked the fact that he had a Muslim ticket.
Yes.
And they said, let us set aside things like ethnicity and religion and just vote for a team that we think can deliver. Nigerians were ready to be Nigerians. Then all of a sudden you have an annulment. Then because the annulment is so unjust, you now try to reduce a national victory and make it a Southwest Yoruba affair. You know, and since that time, you can't even imagine Nigerians backing a Muslim ticket today or a Christian ticket today. Even with so there's so many ethnic balancing, religious balancing.
Yes.
And it's painful. The country was pushed back, and I could weep because I know that the whole continent of Africa is depending on Nigeria. Not just the whole continent of Africa, the whole black race is depending on this country. Should this country rise, the disrespect, the racism that all of Africa and black people endure all over the world will shift, because what the black world needs is dignity. And once we have the biggest black nation in the world is Nigeria, and once it can stand on its feet, the whole world will look at the black world differently.
Absolutely.
And yet this man, because of his fears, I just think that he said he would have been killed, but they called him the Maradona. He should have applied all his ingenuity, his genius, to figuring out a way that we would have honored the June 12th election, honored the results, and allowed Nigeria to move forward.
Okay, I'm talking about, you know, the tickets, you know, the Muslim tickets. The running mate of your father at the time, Babagana Kingibe, he abandoned the struggle at some point and, you know, got into bed with the people that made that happen. There are people who feel that he should not have been added to these honorary lists, and he should not be honored because you abandoned the family, you abandoned the race, you abandoned the fight, you abandoned your principles. So why are you being honored? How do you feel about that?
You know, right now, I've been working for the last 7 years with Senator Ibikule Amosun of Ogun State, a remarkable individual who fought like my father, you know, but he was fighting at the time to be governor, and many times it seemed as if it was rigged out. The thing about when you have a governor is that it's not just the governor on his ticket. You have the governor and the deputy governor. They come as a team. And if you have a presidential candidate, it's not just the presidential candidate. It comes as a combined ticket with the vice presidential candidate. So if you're going to honor one, you have to honor the other. So you can say that did Babagana Kingibe honor the election? Did he act in a principled way? And he will tell you that he felt that he should go into the government of General Sani Abacha and struggle from within. I don't really buy that, but I think he has. This is what he says to everyone.
That's a plausible excuse.
Yes, yes. This is it. But one thing I do know is that in a country as diverse as Nigeria, with the ethnic diversity, regional diversity, religious diversity, linguistic diversity, anything that we can do to be inclusive. It's not that we lose our principles, but anything we can do to embrace every part of Nigeria is good for Nigeria. And if we, by honoring Babagana Kingibe, is conferred this title of GCON, in the end, it's not even just about him. It's about the people from where he has come, which is Borno State. And they have been through so much in the last few years that to be able to give them something, some good news cannot... MKO would be happy. I know MKO. It would be happy for them to have good news.
But let's talk about the president himself, right? The president that, is conferring this and, is honoring your father. He was in Abacha's government.
Yes.
I mean, General Sani Abacha was one where I was.
Yes.
He was in Abacha's. He worked closely with Abacha, and he just said recently that you say what you can about Abacha, but he did this, he did that, and it just seemed like he has never really condemned Abacha's, wrongs or doings at the time. And so him now, I have never heard him talk about your father or the June 12 election. He's never made a statement. We don't know where he stands, but he worked closely with Abacha. And so there are people who feel it is hypocritical what he's doing, and he has a political undertone because 2019 is around the corner. He's trying to buy the vote from the Southwest. Do you share the same view?
Well, I think it's a reflection of life, that things never happen that the way that you'd expect, or the way that you would expect if you read fairy tales. In fairy tales, everything is always pretty black or white.
Yeah.
And in real life, it's just not like that.
There's shades of grey all over the place.
Yes. And you often find that the people that support you are the last people you think would. And then the people that try to bring you down are the people you would have thought would always have your back. That's life. It's how life is. Who would have expected? If I tell you the story of President Obasanjo and my dad, how they went to the same school in Baptist Boys High School in Abeokuta, how my dad was a year ahead, and because he always had a little bit of money from being a boxer and a musician, he always helped out his friend. This is not from being the business mogul. No, this is when they were still very humble beginnings. He was still very helpful to his friend, the Baba Obasanjo. And even in later years, when Obasanjo had served as president, head of state in the first term, and then went back to being a farmer, and he would, whenever I had any difficulty, my father helped. Not once, not twice, countless times. And it's not, we don't need to say it about Baba Obasanjo. We could say it about many people, because that was just MKO expressing himself. That was just who he was. So if we had then said, Baba Obasanjo is going to be made president in 1999, wouldn't you have expected that Baba Obasanjo would be the first person
to acknowledge,
to honor him? And people talked to him. people, you can imagine that you're from Ogun State, MKO is from Ogun State. So even within Ogun State, it would have been inundated with requests that he should do something for our son, your brother. He did nothing. He didn't even speak his name. So when we now arrive at 2018, the 6th of June, and somebody hands down an executive order, we have to take note. And we can say, yes, that this person has this history, but I don't think that we can say because he has this history, we cannot regard what he is doing. One thing I do know is that even, in the time when he was vying for elections, not once, not twice, he vied, I think, four times. So I think the second time when he was vying, the parties changed their names. Was it ANPP or?
Yeah,
it was ANPP.
Yeah, then it became CPC.
My older brother, Yushao Olaleko, was part of ANPP. And he was close to General Buhari at the time. And so one time, General Buhari came to Lagos and asked to come to our house and to come to the graves of my parents to pay his respects. And he came,
wow.
And he prayed for them. So there was some relationship. And the truth is that there are many people, powerful people in Nigeria, who do not want M.K.O Abiola to be acknowledged. It's not just an accident that nothing was done for so long. For this man to do it is that he is brave enough and he has the courage to face those people. That's powerful. Is it possible that he's also having considerations about 2019? Yes, possibly. But I think it doesn't take away from what he has done.
And that should not be the major focus of this particular doing.
Well, I've been waiting 25 years. And even me, to be honest with you, my sister, I had already given up on my country. And I was preparing myself to move away from that world. So I said to myself, if MKO and Kudi, who did so much, could be so relegated, this is not a country to which you should be dedicating your life. And for me, it's a gift for my president to do this. It's a gift for my life because it reframes, it puts me back in the focus and on the path that my parents set for me.
When I read your poem, you said that Nigeria doesn't honor high heroes. And, so this feels like, okay, it's like a path to that place is coming.
Yes, we do. I mean, because here we've done it.
It's finally been done. But I want to talk about, the former president, Goodluck Jonathan. He also tried to honor when he tried to rename Unilag to Maulag. And that, of course, there was an outcry, there was controversy. How did you feel at the time? Did you feel, because people thought it wasn't adequate and that it was political as well. So comparing that to now, how did you feel at the time, especially with the uproar?
Well, with the uproar, I think that was a little bit of politics. I think that there was, but the truth, I think part of it was that the opposition had been talking to people like Ashiwaju and Governor Aregbesola, had been talking to President Jonathan to do something. They talked about the National Stadium in Abuja. This idea that they would name the University of Lagos after Moshood Abiola, it was part of this effort to regionalize a national person. The man did not win election to be
in Lagos,
or even to be Southwest president. He won election to be Nigeria's president, and he got I saw the election results because it's been posted online. I checked
it as well. Yes,
20 out of 30 states, Joe. That was landslide.
It was a landslide.
Yes, and so nobody should try to regionalize somebody that was national. I didn't think that my father, so I wasn't really interested in University of Lagos. The people in University of Lagos, this is our school. I just thought to myself, listen, MKO was not killed because he was trying to have a school named after him. Adi wanted University of Lagos named after him when he was alive. There would have been no problem because those ones would Wati Foleni, because they would have understood what the ramifications for them. What the benefits would be. Yes. Yeah. So keep your school, keep the name. That's not what caused them to die. What caused them to die was the fight for presidency of Nigeria. And anything that is in that line, I think, is more befitting.
There are people who are saying that, you know, your mother should also be honored.
Why not?
You know,
She
where
was
this is concerned.
I think it's just part of the way that the world is, that, you know, the efforts of women are often, you know, set aside. But this was
and
the
you're probably
effort.
like, okay, she was fighting for her husband anyway, so hey, if we
But
honor her husband, we honor her.
Yeah, no, but they will have to honor her because she had her own life. And he had several wives, and she was the only one that they knew that they'd gone down. She's the only one for which there's a grave in M.K.O's house for fighting for June 12th. So no, she deserves her own honor. And I would ask, because I don't want women continually undervalued, discounted.
And relegated to,
I know. I mean, we're always erased from history. We play our role, but when they tell the story, it's always men. And this is just one more example, which we women now can stand in solidarity and reject that example. So, you know, since we've gotten one thing, you can imagine that we'll keep working for the rest of it.
Keep working until we get the rest of it. Okay, we're going to wrap this up very shortly. Let's talk about, you know, your appointment. Let's talk about, you know, the Women Initiative, what that means for you, you know, and you have followed in your parents' footsteps, an activist and all that. So how does all of this fit in?
So I've been appointed as President and CEO of Women in Africa, which is an initiative committed to the empowerment of the women of the continent. And we have our offices in France and in Morocco, and I will be opening an office in Lagos, in Nigeria. We have a network across the continent. We have ambassadors in 32 countries, and already Africa councils in about 16. And during my time, in the past, we've held an annual summit in Morocco, in Marrakesh, which we'll hold again this year. We hold them in September, but now I'm trying to work with the team to change the date to October, because I don't want us as women in Africa to miss the UN key dates.
Okay.
At the UN in September, and also the Gates Foundation holds a major event also in New York in September. I need the voices of African women present at those key events, so I don't want us to have a conflict in our schedule. But we're working on that for 2019. What we've been doing is holding the summits that convene women. So we've convened about 600 women in Morocco last year, and we've been holding regional events in Senegal. I was just at a regional event that we had in Paris, in France, where we were hosting the First Lady of Angola. You know, Angola just brought in a new government in September last year.
Yes.
And the First Lady is an accomplished economist with a very clear agenda for women's empowerment. So we're hosting her in Paris and beginning to think about what we could do in collaboration with them. And so now that I'm in the helm of affairs for this organization, I want us to, because I'm from a big country and I was raised in a family with a father that had very big ideas, I want us to scale and scale quickly. Africa has over 1.1 billion people, of which maybe roughly half of that will be women. So right now we identify entrepreneurs across the 54 African countries that will be coming to Morocco. We're identifying 54 entrepreneurs. We're going to be supporting them, training them. We have our partners ready to invest in them. But I just think 54 is too small. So I'm just thinking, working now to design with the team and pulling together our different partners to look for the things that we're going to do that's going to make a direct and quick impact on the continent, looking in the areas of healthcare, in the areas of education, focusing on vocational technical education, in the areas of agriculture, how we increase the productivity of women farmers, in the area of financing, all kinds of areas, things that I know that will benefit the women of Africa. And I want us to be talking in terms of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions.
That is huge.
Well, that's what we need. Because my fundamental belief is that everybody talks about the rise of Africa, but Africa is not actually really rising. A lot of the focus...
A lot of people actually have agreed that is a myth. We're not rising anywhere.
Yeah, we're not, because the focus is still on commodities. And for Africa to rise, We have to shift the focus to the people of Africa, how we improve the productivity of the people of Africa and open up opportunities for the people of Africa. And I think it's the women of Africa that must lead the way.
That. Okay.
Yes.
2 more questions and then we're done.
Okay.
First one. I have been reading online where people have this view that if M.K.O Abiola was alive, he wouldn't be happy with what is going on in government right now. He wouldn't be happy with the Buhari administration. He wouldn't be happy with the fact that human rights is like this. He wouldn't be happy with the fact that, you know, the poverty line, I mean, we have crossed it over and over and over again.
Yes.
You know, how do you feel about this administration? How do you feel about 2019?
So I feel that MKO went into politics because he was concerned about the poverty, and his campaign platform was Hope 93, Farewell to Poverty. And Nigeria is more deeply poor. We have more extreme poverty in Nigeria today than we had in 1993. Absolutely. And it's an indictment. It's an indictment. It suggests that, you know, for the opportunity that was missed in 1993, Nigeria didn't recover. And indeed, 2 years ago, that was exactly what President Buhari said. Buhari said, you know, people asked him, because it was around the time of June 12, and people were asking for his reaction on June 12, because people wanted to know what he thinks about this, about June 12. And he said, one thing I can say is that since June 12, 1993, Nigeria has not moved forward.
But as they move forward, this is 2018.
Now, I think that if you look at the work of the Buhari administration, there are many things that they're doing to try to move the country forward. And I actually, you know, I studied in the US, I studied economics with a focus on development economics, I mean, how people move out of poverty. Then I studied in China, pretty much the same thing, but it was called international development, but I was focusing on the development story of Asian countries, especially China. So when you study those things, you see that development takes time. It takes not just a little bit of time, it takes a huge amount of time. And sometimes you do not see the progress that is being made. So the Buhari administration tell us that they're investing more in infrastructure. This is important. We need infrastructure to address the lack of competitiveness of the Nigerian economy. But as Bill Gates said when he spoke before the Federal Executive Council, we're not investing enough in human capital development. Yeah. Because they have to go hand in hand. As you're building the roads, you must improve the human capital. But I think that because of the paucity of funds, maybe there's been some challenge in this area, but I think there's efforts now to revisit this issue. One thing I learned from June 12 is that the people in government will say one thing, but us, the people, the Nigerian people, can challenge that and say another. Okay. And I think that it's for the Nigerian people, now that we know that this government says that they want to do well by us, that they're well-intentioned, to keep pressing on them what we need, which is more investment in education, more investment in healthcare, more investments in the things that will help lift the Nigerian people as a body, you know, and we shouldn't be paying so much attention to all these things that is aimed at dividing us as people, because we're all united in our poverty. The Yoruba say that, you know, even the wealthy man amidst 9 poor men is also a poor man. And that's what we're experiencing. That's what we're dealing with. Let's all come together and confront the poverty. And, you know, I'm with Senator Amosun's administration, which is part of the APC government. And I've seen the remarkable efforts we've been making there. I've seen, you know, and yet,
so some people will say you're biased. You're part of the
So
APC.
I am probably biased, but I don't know, you know, I don't know, you know, you can't have 2 dead parents fighting to end poverty and be biased. You will be committed to that issue. It's not, because for me, it's not whether it's APC or PDP. For me, it's the issue that my parents died for. At the end of the day, nobody can buy me. Because what is the amount of money you can give me that will compensate for
the loss that you
lovely human beings that were larger than life and more than enough for me? So I just want us to see that what they were fighting for is realized. And I think that what President Buhari is fighting are some vested interests in Nigeria who feel that they own Nigeria. And from what I can see, if they're fighting him the way that we see them fighting him, there's something he's doing that is in our interest.
Okay. Last question. Before we're into politics, are you going to follow the footsteps of your father at some point?
Why not? I mean, maybe, but...
why not maybe? Why not sounds a bit definitive. Maybe it's tentative. So which one of them is it?
To serve the people of Nigeria is the greatest gift in the whole world. To serve Africans as a whole is the greatest gift. To serve people. That was my training, and that's what I like to do. And whenever there's an opportunity, I will always consider it.
Oh, thank you so much for being a part of the program. It was great having this conversation with you.
I'm a Delta. And I hope, that we will also, when we're recognizing Kudirat Abiola, recognize Chief Alfred Rouhani of Delta State. And as a symbol of just how much people all over Nigeria did.
There are people who complain about Humphrey Nwosu not being recognized.
And Humphrey Nwosu, there's so many. I think that, with this beginning that President Buhari has done, you will soon find that he will be inundated with...
Absolutely.
And that's good for us as a country, because we start to see that we've had heroes all along.
And not just the ones from 1960.
No.
Thank you very much for being a part of the show. Okay, so this is how we wrap up Roundtable for today. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can be a part of this conversation. You can always follow us on social media at GloommeTV, on Instagram and on Twitter. And also, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. My name is Faith. Follow me at Fabrike, and do have a lovely, lovely day.